Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Michael Jordan's story begins not with a ball in his hands, but with a boy who loved to compete. Growing up in Wilmington, North Carolina, Jordan spent hours on the neighborhood courts, dreaming of the day he would become a basketball legend. Back then, he wasn't the Michael Jordan that the world would later know. He was just Mike, a teenager with a fierce will to win and a chip on his shoulder, always trying to prove he could be the best. From a young age, Jordan showed signs of greatness, but the road wasn't smooth. His early years were filled with rejection and doubt. He wasn't the tallest, the fastest, or the most naturally gifted. In fact, he was cut from his high school basketball team. The moment was a crushing blow, not just for Jordan, but for the people around him who saw the raw potential in him. To many, it seemed like a dream fading, but to Jordan, it was fuel. The sting of that rejection only made him more determined. Instead of accepting defeat, he found himself practicing on that old court in his backyard for hours on end. The court became his sanctuary, a place where the outside world and its doubts could be shut out. It wasn't just about basketball anymore, it was about proving something to himself. Every dribble, every shot, every moment spent on the court brought him closer to his goal. He didn't just want to make the team, he wanted to dominate the game. The more he worked, the more he began to stand out. By the time Jordan played for the University of North Carolina, he had developed a relentless work ethic and an unmatched hunger for success. He wasn't just a part of the team, he was a leader. But it wasn't always easy. The pressures of college basketball, the expectations, and the spotlight were daunting, but Jordan thrived. He had the kind of mentality that turned pressure into opportunity. When it came time for the championship game, Jordan delivered the kind of clutch performance that made people take notice. His game-winning shot in the 1982 NCAA championship as a freshman was the first glimpse of what he could become. But it wasn't all about basketball. Jordan was a student, a son, and a brother. Growing up in Wilmington, his family meant everything to him. His parents, James and Dolores Jordan, instilled a strong sense of discipline and integrity in him. They pushed him to be the best, but they also made sure he understood that character and hard work would take him further than talent alone. In those early years, Jordan wasn't just shaping himself as a player, he was learning the values that would define his legacy. Jordan's early basketball journey was filled with ups and downs, victories and defeats, but every experience added a layer to his growth as both a player and a person. There were moments of doubt, like the time he had been cut from the high school team, but also moments of victory, like when he earned his spot as a freshman at UNC. These early experiences would mold Jordan into the fierce competitor that the world would come to know and respect. They would also teach him how to handle adversity, how to fight back against the odds, and how to turn failure into fuel. By the time he entered the NBA, Jordan had learned what it meant to be truly great. He wasn't the perfect player, but he was relentless. He wasn't content with just being good. He wanted to be the best, and he was willing to put in the work to get there. His early struggles and setbacks were just the beginning. The NBA would become his proving ground, and his journey to greatness was only just beginning. As Jordan moved from college into the pros, the world began to see something extraordinary. His competitive spirit, his ability to rise to any occasion, and his unwavering commitment to excellence set him apart. But even then, his story wasn't defined by victories alone. It was the moments of struggle, of failure, and of resilience that truly shaped him. Michael Jordan wasn't born with a silver spoon. He wasn't a guaranteed success. He was a young man with a dream that seemed impossible at times, but one that he never stopped chasing. The court in Wilmington, North Carolina, where he spent countless hours as a boy, was where it all began. It wasn't a fancy gym or a spotlight on the big stage. It was a simple outdoor court, but for Michael Jordan, it was the start of a journey that would change the game of basketball forever. And it was here, on this court, where he learned the most important lesson of all: greatness isn't just about talent, it's about heart, determination, and the willingness to push through the toughest challenges. As Jordan prepared to enter the NBA, the world would soon discover that the lessons he learned on that court in Wilmington were just the beginning of something much bigger. The boy who was once cut from his high school basketball team would become the player who would change the game forever. And it all started with that simple love for the game, that determination to be the best, and that fire to prove the world wrong. But the journey wasn't going to be easy. Even in the NBA, Jordan would face rivalries, injuries, and moments of doubt. It wasn't going to be a smooth ride to greatness. Yet, every challenge only pushed him harder, every setback only made him more determined. What lay ahead for Michael Jordan was a legacy of unmatched success, and the story of how he got there was filled with passion, pain, and triumph. This was just the beginning. Michael Jordan's early years in the NBA were not as glamorous as many might think. After being selected third overall by the Chicago Bulls in the 1984 draft, Jordan entered a league that was dominated by established stars like Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The Bulls were not a powerhouse team, and they didn't have the luxury of a championship pedigree that could help ease the transition for a rookie. But Jordan was different. He wasn't fazed by the challenge ahead. His competitive fire, which had been honed in Wilmington, was now set to burn on basketball's biggest stage. The transition to the NBA wasn't smooth. Despite his undeniable talent, Jordan faced numerous obstacles early on. The Bulls were still trying to find their footing, and their roster wasn't built to compete with the powerhouse teams of the 1980s. The Boston Celtics and Los Angeles Lakers dominated the NBA during this period, and the Bulls were constantly overshadowed. In his first few seasons, Jordan was forced to carry the weight of the entire team. He had to become a one-man show, a player who could drop 50 points on any given night, but who couldn't lift his team to playoff contention. However, the struggles of those early years were pivotal in shaping Jordan's mentality. He learned quickly that individual brilliance alone wouldn't be enough to secure championships. He needed help, and that's when the Bulls began to make the moves that would eventually set them on a path to greatness. In 1987, the Bulls made a key acquisition, bringing in a talented forward named Scottie Pippen. But it wasn't just Pippen's arrival that made the difference, it was the way the two players complemented each other. Pippen's versatile skill set allowed him to defend and play multiple positions, while Jordan's scoring ability and leadership began to shine brighter. Still, the road to success wasn't clear-cut. Despite their growing chemistry, the Bulls were consistently knocked out of the playoffs by teams with more experience, like the Boston Celtics, who had one of the most stacked rosters in NBA history. In 1986, Jordan had one of the most unforgettable individual performances in NBA history, scoring 63 points against the Celtics in the playoffs. Despite his incredible performance, the Bulls lost the game and the series. It was a bittersweet moment. Jordan proved to the world that he could go toe-to-toe with the league's best, but he was also forced to reckon with the harsh reality that great individual performances meant little if the team couldn't win together. The turning point came in 1989, when the Bulls faced the Cleveland Cavaliers in the Eastern Conference first round. Jordan had made the leap from a talented individual player to a true team leader. The Cavaliers were a formidable team, led by Brad Daugherty and Mark Price, and they were the favorites to win the series. But in Game 5, Jordan delivered what would become one of the most iconic moments in NBA history. With just a few seconds left, Jordan hit a jump shot over Craig Ello to win the game and the series. The moment was electrifying. It was a clear sign that Jordan had grown from a one-man show into a winner. Still, even after this signature moment, Jordan's legacy as a winner was still in question. The next few seasons were filled with growing pains. Despite having one of the most dominant players in the game, the Bulls were still struggling to break through in the postseason. It was clear that something was missing, a piece of the puzzle that could push them over the top. In 1990, the Bulls made another crucial move, acquiring the savvy and tough veteran, John Paxson. With Paxson's steady presence, the team began to gel, but it wasn't until 1991 that they finally broke through to the top. In the 1991 NBA Finals, the Chicago Bulls faced off against the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers, led by Magic Johnson, were the reigning champions, and they had one of the most storied dynasties in NBA history. The Bulls, on the other hand, were still relatively untested on the grand stage. But Jordan and his teammates were ready. This series was a chance to prove not only that Jordan was the best player in the game, but also that the Bulls were a legitimate title contender. The series didn't start off in Jordan's favor. The Lakers were the more experienced team, and they took an early lead in the series. However, Jordan's relentless drive and determination were evident in Game 2, when he put up a dominating performance, leading the Bulls to a decisive victory. From that point on, the Bulls began to take control of the series. Jordan's leadership was on full display. He was more than just a scorer, he was a complete player, willing to do whatever it took to win. In the decisive Game 5, the Bulls clinched their first NBA championship with a 108-101 victory. Jordan was named Finals MVP, and his triumph was a testament to his growth as both a player and a leader. But the victory was about more than just the championship. It was about the culmination of years of hard work, struggle, and sacrifice. Jordan had finally reached the pinnacle of the sport, and the world had witnessed the birth of a new dynasty. But even as Jordan celebrated his first championship, he knew that the journey wasn't over. The Bulls had achieved greatness, but there was a sense of unfinished business. For Jordan, the goal was always clear. He wanted to build a legacy, one that would be remembered long after he left the game. He wasn't content with just one title, he wanted more. The hunger for success, the desire to prove that he could do it year after year, burned in him like a fire that would never go out. The next few seasons saw the rise of the Chicago Bulls as an unstoppable force in the NBA. The team had all the pieces, Jordan, Pippen, and a supporting cast that included players like Tony Kukoc, Steve Kerr, and Bill Wennington. Under the leadership of coach Phil Jackson, the Bulls adopted a new philosophy that emphasized teamwork, unselfish play, and mental discipline. It was this approach that would help propel them to their next 3 championships, solidifying their place as one of the greatest dynasties in NBA history. Jordan's impact on the game was undeniable. His performances on the court were awe-inspiring, and his leadership was transformative. But his influence extended far beyond basketball. He became a global icon, someone who transcended the sport and became a symbol of excellence, hard work, and determination. His success wasn't just about what he achieved on the court, it was about the way he changed the way people viewed basketball and athletes in general. The years following Jordan's first championship marked the beginning of a new era in the NBA. His rivalry with Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and the emerging players of his own generation would come to define the 1990s. But for Jordan, the ultimate goal was always the same: to be the best, to win, and to leave a lasting legacy. And as the years went on, it became clear that Michael Jordan was well on his way to achieving just that. By 1996, Michael Jordan had established himself as one of the most formidable forces in the NBA, but the journey to his second three-peat was not without its challenges. He had already retired once, walked away from basketball in 1993 to pursue a career in baseball, and then returned in 1995 to reclaim his throne. His comeback, though filled with emotional highs, was also met with intense scrutiny and doubts. Yet, despite the questions surrounding his return, Jordan was determined to prove that he had more to give. The 1995-96 season would mark a pivotal moment in Jordan's career, a season that would redefine both his legacy and the Chicago Bulls as a whole. The Bulls were no longer the same team they had been before his first retirement. They had undergone a series of changes, including the addition of key pieces like Steve Kerr, Tony Kukoc, and Luke Longley. But the centerpiece remained the same: Michael Jordan. The question now was whether this new version of the team could return to championship form. Jordan was still the most dominant player on the court, but his return also came with a new level of maturity. He had grown not just as a player but as a leader. Gone were the days when he had to do it all himself. Now, Jordan was more willing to rely on his teammates and trust them to help shoulder the load. This shift was evident in his play, as he began to focus on team-oriented basketball, something that had eluded the Bulls in earlier years. Phil Jackson, now firmly established as the head coach, implemented his famous triangle offense, a system that emphasized spacing, ball movement, and collective effort over individual heroics. The results were immediate and impressive. Jordan was once again playing at an elite level, and his teammates were thriving in the system. Scottie Pippen, already a star in his own right, had matured into one of the league's most versatile players, while Kerr and Kukoc provided scoring and depth off the bench. The team was clicking, and the chemistry was undeniable. But the true test would come in the postseason. The Bulls breezed through the regular season, finishing with a league-best 72-10 record, the most wins in NBA history at the time. But for Jordan, the regular season was just a warm-up. The real goal was always the playoffs, where his true competitive spirit would be tested. And in 1996, the playoffs were filled with challenges that would require every bit of Jordan's brilliance. In the Eastern Conference Finals, the Bulls faced a talented and gritty Orlando Magic team, led by Shaquille O'Neal and Penny Hardaway. The Magic had defeated the Bulls the year before in the Eastern Conference semifinals, and they were determined to take the next step. But Jordan was not having it. The Bulls stormed through the Magic in 4 straight games, sweeping them out of the playoffs. Jordan's performance was nothing short of spectacular, as he averaged 30.4 points per game, showing the world that he hadn't missed a beat since his return. The NBA Finals were set to be a showdown for the ages, with the Bulls facing the Seattle Supersonics. The Supersonics, led by Gary Payton, Shawn Kemp, and Detlef Schrempf, were a dangerous team in their own right, boasting a deep roster and one of the league's best defenses. But the Bulls, with Jordan at the helm, were on another level. The final series was competitive, but ultimately, the Bulls proved to be too much. Jordan played like the legend he was, dominating offensively and defensively. His ability to take over games was a sight to behold, and his leadership was never more apparent. The turning point of the series came in Game 6, when the Bulls closed out the Supersonics to win their 4th championship. Jordan's performance in the finals cemented his place as the greatest player in the game. He averaged 27.3 points per game, and his all-around game was in full display, as he contributed in every facet of the game, scoring, rebounding, passing, and playing defense. The victory was a testament to not just his individual brilliance, but also the teamwork that had been developed over the course of the season. With his 4th NBA title in hand, Jordan had proven once again that he was the best player in the world. But there was something different about this championship. It wasn't just the dominance of his individual play, it was the way the team had come together. The Bulls weren't just Jordan's team anymore. They were a collective unit, one that could win together and relied on each other. For the first time in his career, Jordan wasn't carrying the team on his back alone. The Bulls were a well-oiled machine, with each player playing a crucial role in their success. In the wake of this championship, many people began to wonder, what else was left for Jordan to accomplish? He had won 4 titles, had proven that he was still the best in the world, and had led his team to one of the most successful seasons in NBA history. For most players, this would be the pinnacle of their careers. But for Michael Jordan, it was just another step in his relentless pursuit of greatness. For Jordan, the drive to win was never about validation, it was about proving to himself that he could continue to be the best. Even after all he had achieved, he still felt that there was more to prove. The 1996 championship was just a piece of the larger puzzle, and Jordan was determined to keep pushing forward. But as the years went on, the toll of constant competition began to take its toll. Jordan had already faced and conquered numerous challenges throughout his career, but the grind of maintaining his level of excellence was becoming more difficult. The pressure of living up to his own legacy, coupled with the constant media scrutiny, weighed on him. He was not just the best player in the world, he was the standard by which all others were measured. The 1996-97 season saw the Bulls continue their dominance. The team was firing on all cylinders, with Jordan, Pippen, and the rest of the supporting cast continuing to play at a high level. The team was well on its way to another championship, but as the playoffs approached, Jordan began to reflect on what more he could accomplish. He wasn't just looking at the now, he was looking at the future and his place in history. Throughout his career, Jordan had never been content with resting on his laurels. He was always striving for more. The fourth title was important, but for Jordan, it was always about what came next. As the 1997 finals approached, his focus was singular: to prove that he was still the best, to win his fifth championship, and to continue to build a legacy that would never be questioned. Jordan's leadership, determination, and ability to rise to the occasion were traits that had defined his career from the very beginning. The 1996 season showed the world that he was still at the top of his game. But it was also a reminder that Michael Jordan's quest for greatness was far from over. The 1997-98 season was the final chapter in what would come to be known as the second three-peat of Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. It was a season filled with emotion, anticipation, and tension. For Jordan, it was a year that began with uncertainty about his future in the league. The constant speculation about whether or not he would retire once again loomed over the team, but it also created an aura of finality. The media had dubbed this year as the last dance, and in many ways, it felt like it was the end of an era. But Jordan, as always, was determined to leave everything on the floor. This season was a culmination of the work he had put in over the previous years, the sacrifices, the leadership, and the intense desire to win. The Bulls were not just looking to win another championship, they were looking to cement their legacy as one of the greatest teams in NBA history. The team had already won 5 championships in the past 7 years, and now they were aiming for the 6th, a feat that would solidify their place in history. The pressure was immense, but it was nothing Jordan hadn't faced before. In the midst of the pressure, the Bulls were a team that still had all the key players: Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and the ever-reliable Steve Kerr. But there was also the sense that time was running out. Phil Jackson, the architect of the Bulls' success, was also on the brink of leaving, with his contract set to expire after the season. It was clear that no matter what happened, this was going to be a season of change. But Jordan thrived in that uncertainty. He thrived in the pressure. Every game, every shot, every moment felt like it could be his last. And in a way, it was. The season started off with high expectations. The Bulls quickly proved that they were still the best team in the league. Jordan's scoring was still at an elite level, and his leadership was unmatched. But the real test came as the playoffs drew closer. The road to a championship would not be easy. Despite their success during the regular season, the Bulls had to navigate through some of the toughest teams in the NBA to reach the finals once again. In the Eastern Conference, the Bulls faced the upstart Indiana Pacers, a team that had become one of the most dangerous in the league. The Pacers, led by Reggie Miller, had given the Bulls trouble in the past, and this series would prove to be one of the most competitive of Jordan's career. The Pacers had the talent and the grit to challenge the Bulls, and they pushed Jordan and his teammates to the limit. Game 4 of the Eastern Conference Finals became a defining moment in the series. The game went down to the wire, with the Bulls and Pacers exchanging leads in the final minutes. Jordan's brilliance, however, was undeniable. With just seconds left on the clock, Jordan calmly hit a crucial shot that gave the Bulls the lead and essentially secured the win. His ability to execute in clutch moments was a trademark of his career, and this game was no different. The Bulls won the series in 7 games, with Jordan's leadership and scoring ability carrying the team through another tough battle. The finals were now set. The Bulls would face the Utah Jazz, a team led by the dynamic duo of Karl Malone and John Stockton. The Jazz were the best team in the Western Conference that season, and they had the experience and the talent to challenge the Bulls for the championship. This was a series that had the potential to be Jordan's greatest test, but it was also a series that would define his legacy. Game 1 of the finals began in Salt Lake City, and the Jazz quickly established that they were going to give the Bulls everything they had. The first few games were filled with physicality, tough defense, and moments of brilliance from both teams. Jordan was still playing at an elite level, but he faced a challenge in the form of the Jazz's defense, which was built to limit his impact. The series was tied at 1-1, and the intensity was only increasing. Then came Game 5, one of the most iconic games in NBA history. Jordan was visibly sick, struggling with flu-like symptoms, but he refused to let that stop him. Despite the physical toll of the illness, Jordan managed to score 38 points in one of his most memorable performances ever. The game became known as the flu game, and it was a testament to Jordan's willpower and determination. Every time the Jazz threatened to take control, Jordan responded with another clutch basket, leading the Bulls to a crucial victory. His performance in that game elevated him to a level of greatness that few athletes in any sport can match. It was an unforgettable moment in the finals, and it was a moment that reminded everyone why Jordan was the best. The Bulls would go on to win the series in 6 games, securing their 6th NBA championship in 8 years. Jordan was named Finals MVP once again, cementing his place as the greatest player in the history of the game. The team had done it, the Bulls had achieved the ultimate success, and Jordan had led them to the top once again. But for Jordan, this victory felt different from the others. It wasn't just the 6th championship, it was the end of an era. Jordan had accomplished everything he had set out to do, and now it was time to walk away. Jordan's legacy was already secure. He had won 6 championships, earned 5 MVP awards, and established himself as a global icon. But it wasn't just the statistics that defined him, it was his mentality, his drive, and his ability to rise above every challenge. He had taken the game of basketball to new heights, and his influence extended far beyond the sport itself. The decision to retire for a second time in 1999 was a moment of closure, not just for Jordan but for the entire basketball world. He had given everything to the game, and there was no more left for him to prove. The Chicago Bulls, once again, would enter a new chapter without Michael Jordan, but the legacy he left behind would forever shape the future of the NBA. Jordan's final season with the Bulls, his 6th championship, and his retirement marked the end of one of the greatest runs in sports history. There would be no more Last Dance, no more moments of brilliance, no more iconic shots. But what Jordan had built, his legacy, his influence, and his impact on the game, would last forever. The man who had once been cut from his high school basketball team had become the greatest player to ever play the game, and his journey would inspire generations to come. As the years passed, Jordan's influence only grew. New generations of players would look to him as the standard, and his name would remain synonymous with greatness. But for those who witnessed his career firsthand, Michael Jordan would always be the player who changed the game forever. The story of his career, filled with triumphs, struggles, and unmatched moments of brilliance, would be told and retold for generations. It wasn't just a story of basketball, it was a story of relentless pursuit, of overcoming every obstacle, and of achieving greatness against all odds. Michael Jordan was, and will always be, the greatest to ever play the game. After his second retirement in 1999, Michael Jordan's impact on the NBA remained undeniable, even though he was no longer on the court. The basketball world had changed in his absence. New stars like Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan, and Shaquille O'Neal emerged, but the shadow of Jordan's greatness still loomed large. His legacy was already firmly cemented as one of the greatest to ever play the game, and even after stepping away from the game, his name was still synonymous with winning, dominance, and excellence. However, the competitive fire that had driven Jordan throughout his career could not be extinguished. It wasn't long before rumors started circulating about his potential return. The idea of Jordan making a comeback was met with skepticism and excitement in equal measure. Could the greatest player in basketball history return to his prime form after being away from the game for so long? Would he be able to lead a team back to the NBA Finals? And perhaps the biggest question of all, was it even possible for Jordan to play at the same level after all the time away? In 2001, at the age of 38, Jordan shocked the world by returning to the NBA. But this time, he wasn't joining the Chicago Bulls. Instead, he signed with the Washington Wizards, a franchise that was far removed from championship contention. Jordan's decision was met with a mix of disbelief and curiosity. It was clear that he still had the desire to compete, but it was unclear if he could still perform at an elite level. Jordan's decision to join the Wizards was as much about his love for the game as it was about his desire to challenge himself. The Wizards, a team that had struggled for years, became his new home, and he quickly became the face of the franchise. Despite his age, Jordan's presence brought a new level of excitement to Washington. The team, which had been languishing in mediocrity, suddenly found itself with one of the most competitive players in the game. But it wasn't just about the impact on the court, it was also about what Jordan could bring to the locker room. He had always been a fierce competitor, and his leadership was unquestioned. His work ethic, his ability to push himself and his teammates, and his relentless drive to win were still evident, even at the age of 38. The younger players on the team were in awe of his dedication and the way he approached every practice, every game, as if it were a chance to prove himself once again. Jordan didn't just show up to play, he showed up to dominate, to compete, and to win. Despite the skepticism surrounding his return, Jordan proved he still had plenty of gas left in the tank. In his first season back with the Wizards, he averaged over 22 points per game. While he wasn't the same player he had been during his peak years with the Bulls, his scoring ability, his leadership, and his basketball IQ were still among the best in the league. He didn't need to jump as high or run as fast. He used his mind, his experience, and his still dangerous skills to continue to perform at a high level. But the physical toll of the game was apparent. Jordan's return to the NBA was not without its challenges. His body, though still in remarkable shape for a player of his age, was not the same as it had been during his prime. Injuries began to pile up, and it became clear that Jordan's body wasn't built for a full season of NBA basketball anymore. Yet, despite these setbacks, he refused to back down. Even in his mid to late 30s, Jordan was still one of the most feared players in the league, and his mere presence on the floor was enough to inspire his teammates and strike fear into opponents. Though Jordan's second stint with the Wizards didn't result in a championship, it added another layer to his already legendary career. It was a reminder that greatness doesn't always come in the form of titles and MVPs, it also comes in the form of resilience, determination, and the ability to challenge yourself, even when the odds are stacked against you. Jordan's time with the Wizards showed the world that his passion for the game and his desire to compete had not diminished with age. He wasn't playing for a ring anymore, he was playing because the game still meant something to him. Throughout his time with the Wizards, Jordan gave everything he had, but there was an underlying sense that his heart was still with the Bulls, still with the team that had made him a global icon. The Wizards were not championship contenders, and while Jordan's return to Washington was impressive, it never quite felt like the same magic as his years in Chicago. His stint in Washington was more of a final chapter, a way for Jordan to show the world that he could still play at a high level and prove to himself that he could compete with the best. When Jordan finally retired for the third and final time in 2003, it was a somber moment for the basketball world. The player who had defined an entire era was stepping away once again, and this time, it was for good. There would be no more game-winning shots, no more breathtaking dunks, and no more unforgettable moments. But the legacy he left behind would endure forever. After his retirement, Jordan's involvement with basketball didn't end. He became a part owner and executive with the Charlotte Hornets, a team that he would later take full control of as the majority owner. His leadership off the court would now focus on building a successful franchise and continuing his influence in the NBA. He wasn't just a player anymore, he was an ambassador for the sport, a mentor to the next generation of players, and a key figure in the continued growth of the league. Jordan's impact extended far beyond the court. He had become a global icon, a symbol of success, hard work, and perseverance. His Air Jordan brand, created in collaboration with Nike, revolutionized the sneaker industry and cemented his place as a cultural force. The shoes became a status symbol, a way for fans to connect with the greatness that Jordan had achieved on the basketball court. For those who witnessed his greatness firsthand, Michael Jordan was more than just a basketball player, he was an inspiration. He taught the world that success isn't just about talent, it's about the work you put in, the sacrifices you make, and the relentless pursuit of greatness. He showed that greatness isn't reserved for the chosen few, it's available to anyone willing to work for it. As the years have passed, Jordan's legacy has only grown. New generations of fans have discovered his brilliance, and younger players have been inspired by his example. The debate about who is the greatest player of all time continues to rage on, but one thing is certain: Michael Jordan will always be a part of that conversation. His place in history is secure, and his influence on the game will never be forgotten. The story of his career is a story of overcoming obstacles, of chasing greatness relentlessly, and of proving that anything is possible with the right mindset. Michael Jordan's legacy is forever etched into the fabric of the NBA, and his story will continue to inspire athletes for generations to come. As Michael Jordan's career in the NBA reached its final stages, the game began to evolve around him. While Jordan was a legendary figure in the 1990s, his departure from the league in the early 2000s signified more than just the end of a personal era. It marked the end of an age in basketball, a time when the sport was ruled by a fierce competitor who had redefined greatness. As Jordan walked away from the game for the final time, the sport began to look toward the future, while still holding onto the legacy he had created. Even as new stars such as Kobe Bryant and LeBron James began to establish themselves as the next great ones in the NBA, Jordan's influence continued to be felt. His legacy loomed over the sport in ways that few athletes experience. Every young player who dreamed of greatness, every fan who adored the game, knew that Michael Jordan had set the standard. Yet, while the league moved on, Jordan's impact wasn't merely confined to the past. It continued to ripple through the NBA and basketball culture as a whole. The NBA had changed by the time Jordan retired for the third time in 2003. The game was faster, with a greater emphasis on athleticism and perimeter shooting. Yet, even in an era that prioritized a different style of play, Jordan's imprint was still evident. His work ethic, his ability to close out games, and his mindset of constantly striving to be the best were qualities that transcended time and trends. Younger players, especially those who grew up watching him, had learned from his example. The traits Jordan had displayed, being able to carry a team, the constant desire to improve, and the relentless drive to win, were the foundation for many of the future stars of the NBA. Jordan's significance as an ambassador of the game only grew in the years following his retirement. His brand, Air Jordan, which had revolutionized the sneaker world in the 1980s and 1990s, continued to be an iconic symbol. The partnership with Nike not only elevated the standard for performance shoes, but also made Jordan a global figure. His face adorned billboards, his name was synonymous with success, and his products were desired worldwide. The Air Jordan brand didn't just represent shoes, it represented everything Jordan had come to symbolize: success, greatness, and overcoming obstacles. The marketing machine around the brand transformed Jordan into something larger than life. He was no longer just a basketball player. He was a cultural icon. While Jordan's business ventures flourished, his love for the game remained intact. In 2010, Jordan took a major step by purchasing a controlling interest in the Charlotte Hornets, a franchise in need of leadership. It was an interesting and somewhat surprising decision. While Jordan was forever linked to the Chicago Bulls, a new chapter in his post-playing career began with a new responsibility. This wasn't just about winning titles for himself anymore. This was about passing on the lessons he had learned and helping to shape the future of basketball. Jordan's move into ownership was emblematic of his natural evolution as a competitor. In many ways, this new role reflected his deep understanding of what it took to be successful. His leadership was no longer about setting the example on the court, but rather shaping the future of an organization. Yet, his competitive spirit was never far behind. He viewed his ownership role as another challenge, one that required him to win, not just in terms of championships, but in building a successful, sustainable franchise. His desire to win, even in a new capacity, was unwavering. However, it was not an easy transition. The Hornets were a franchise that had struggled with consistency for years, and their performance on the court mirrored the challenges they faced off of it. Jordan, whose presence had once driven his teams to the top of the league, now had to navigate the intricacies of managing a team from a business perspective. The first few seasons were difficult. The Hornets faced issues with team building, scouting, and overall management. But Jordan's persistence paid off. Slowly, the team began to improve, with key additions made in the draft and free agency. Despite setbacks, Jordan's hand on the franchise helped create a foundation that could one day lead to success. While Jordan was still heavily involved with the Hornets, his legacy continued to be celebrated across the basketball world. Every player who had grown up watching him wanted to be like Mike. That was the standard. But it wasn't just on the court where his legacy lived on, it was also in the values he instilled in the next generation of players. Today's superstars still carry the torch of Jordan's mentality, using his competitive fire, his tireless work ethic, and his refusal to accept anything less than the best as a model to guide their own careers. Many current players, from Bryant to James, frequently cite Jordan as the figure who inspired them to push the boundaries of what was possible in the sport. Kobe Bryant, in particular, was often compared to Jordan. Having modeled much of his game after Jordan's, Kobe became the next best thing to Jordan himself. He was often referred to as Jordan's heir, as both players shared an almost identical mentality and style of play. Bryant, like Jordan, wasn't just a scorer, he was a relentless competitor who lived for the big moments and refused to back down in the face of adversity. But as much as Kobe emulated Jordan, he also respected him. The two developed a close relationship over the years, and Kobe frequently spoke about how Jordan had helped him throughout his career. Bryant's success in his own right is proof that Jordan's legacy was alive and well, even in the next generation. In LeBron James, basketball fans have witnessed another player whose talents and ambitions are often compared to Jordan's. The debate between who is the greatest of all time, Jordan or LeBron, has become one of the most popular discussions in sports. While there are countless factors in the comparison, one thing is certain: Jordan's greatness helped define the standard against which all others are measured. LeBron James, despite being a generational talent, has continuously referenced Jordan as the benchmark for success. The drive to achieve greatness that began with Jordan has now manifested in James, and that cycle of competition and influence continues to push the game of basketball forward. Even though Jordan is no longer playing the game, his impact remains significant. The NBA's popularity grew exponentially during his career, and his influence helped push the sport into the global mainstream. The NBA, under the guidance of commissioners like David Stern and Adam Silver, capitalized on Jordan's cultural relevance, expanding the league's reach to audiences all over the world. The Jordan effect was real, and it wasn't just confined to basketball. He helped revolutionize the marketing of athletes, turning them into global icons who could cross over into other industries, from fashion to advertising to entertainment. Jordan's legacy is not just one of championships and accolades. It's about the mentality of an athlete who refused to accept failure. It's about the commitment to being the best, no matter what it takes. And it's about inspiring an entire generation of players, fans, and aspiring athletes to believe that greatness is not reserved for the chosen few, it's available to anyone who is willing to put in the work. In retirement, Michael Jordan remains one of the most recognizable figures in the world, not just because of what he accomplished on the court, but because of what he represented. He is a symbol of dedication, resilience, and excellence, values that transcend time and sport. The world of basketball has continued to evolve, but the lessons Jordan taught us remain as relevant today as they were during his prime. His legacy, built on the foundation of success, will continue to inspire generations to come. Michael Jordan's story isn't just about basketball, it's about striving for greatness in everything you do. And that is a legacy that will last forever. Michael Jordan's return to the NBA in 2001 was as unexpected as it was audacious. Having retired for the second time in 1999, Jordan had stepped away from the game he had dominated for over a decade, leaving behind a legacy of 6 championships, 5 MVP awards, and a brand that was more influential than most companies. However, after nearly 2 years of absence, Jordan was still as restless as ever. His return to basketball wasn't driven by the desire for more accolades, it was driven by a simple, undeniable fact: he still loved the game. When Jordan announced that he would join the Washington Wizards, there was an immediate wave of skepticism. Many believed that his best years were behind him. After all, He had already reached the pinnacle of basketball success. Why return now, at 38, with a body that had already endured the wear and tear of countless battles? It was a valid question, but it missed the core of who Michael Jordan was, a competitor. For Jordan, it wasn't about making a comeback for validation. It was about proving, once again, that he could perform at the highest level. When he first suited up for the Wizards, it wasn't the familiar number 23. Instead, he chose number 23's counterpart, number 23's predecessor, the number 23's mystique. Number 23 was already taken by a rising star. But for Jordan, it wasn't about the number. It was about the challenge. Could he still be Michael Jordan? Could he prove that his greatness wasn't just a product of youth, but of a mindset that was as sharp as ever? The Washington Wizards weren't a team on the verge of a championship. In fact, they had been at the bottom of the standings for years. However, Jordan's arrival was a seismic shift for the franchise. He wasn't just a star on the court, he was a leader, a mentor, and a source of inspiration for a team that had never been successful. His presence alone made the Wizards relevant, bringing attention to a team that had long been overlooked. In his first season with the Wizards, Jordan played at a high level. His numbers weren't what they had been in his prime, but they were still impressive. He averaged 22.9 points per game, 5.7 rebounds, and 5.2 assists. For a 38-year-old player, those numbers were remarkable. More importantly, Jordan's ability to still dominate games, even with the physical limitations that come with age, was a testament to his basketball IQ and unparalleled work ethic. The media was relentless in its scrutiny of Jordan's return. Some were quick to point out that he wasn't the same player he had been in Chicago. His speed had diminished, and his once explosive athleticism was no longer as apparent. Yet, what Jordan lacked in speed, he more than made up for with his intelligence and experience. He knew how to manage the game, how to pick his spots, and when to exert his energy. He wasn't trying to relive the past, he was adapting to the present. He proved to the doubters that his ability to impact the game wasn't solely reliant on athleticism. Jordan's return wasn't just about his individual performance, it was about the effect he had on his teammates. A young team with players like Richard Hamilton, Jerry Stackhouse, and Chris Webber were eager to learn from the greatest of all time. Jordan, despite being in the twilight of his career, became a mentor to these younger players. He taught them how to approach the game, how to manage their bodies, and how to handle the pressure of performing at the highest level. His work ethic became a model for them to follow. It was clear that Jordan's return had a profound effect on the Wizards, but it also had a ripple effect across the entire league. Players and teams across the NBA watched as the 38-year-old veteran showed up every day and gave it his all. It wasn't just about scoring or winning, it was about the passion for the game, the mentality of pushing through every obstacle, and the hunger to keep getting better. Jordan's message was clear: age was no excuse, and greatness didn't fade with time. While his time with the Wizards wasn't as successful as his days with the Bulls, it wasn't without its significant moments. There were flashes of brilliance, including a 51-point game against the Charlotte Hornets in 2001. Jordan was still capable of taking over games and putting up numbers that few could match, even at his advanced age. But the Wizards were never able to build a championship contender around him, and the team was unable to make a deep playoff run. Despite the challenges, Jordan's time with the Wizards helped reshape the narrative about what it meant to be great. It demonstrated that greatness was more than just physical dominance, it was mental strength, an unrelenting work ethic, and the drive to overcome obstacles. It wasn't about holding on to past glory, it was about continuously striving for excellence, even in the face of decline. Jordan's second stint in the NBA also underscored his influence beyond the basketball court. His return helped boost the profile of the NBA, bringing attention back to a league that had experienced a dip in popularity after his initial retirement. He was still the face of the game, the player everyone wanted to see, and he was helping usher in a new generation of NBA fans. Players like Kobe Bryant and LeBron James, who had grown up watching Jordan, were now beginning to take center stage, and Jordan's legacy loomed over them as both a challenge and an inspiration. But just as his return to the game was an important chapter, so was his eventual departure. In 2003, Jordan retired for the third and final time. His final game with the Wizards was symbolic. He had given everything to the game, and there was nothing left to prove. His final season wasn't defined by his individual performances, but by his leadership and his role as a bridge between eras. He had helped mentor the next generation of stars while also showing them what it meant to be truly great. Though his playing days were over, Jordan's legacy continued to thrive in the NBA. His influence on the league, both on and off the court, remained as strong as ever. The players who came after him, from Kobe Bryant to LeBron James, were not just inspired by his skill but by his mentality. Jordan had set the standard for what it meant to be a champion, and those who followed in his footsteps sought to match or exceed his greatness. As an owner of the Charlotte Hornets, Jordan also played a pivotal role in shaping the future of the league. His leadership as an executive wasn't about personal glory but about helping to build a successful team. It wasn't the same as being a player on the court, but it was a continuation of his legacy. Now, he was working to pass on his knowledge and understanding of the game to future generations of players, coaches, and executives. Though Michael Jordan had long since retired from the NBA, his influence still looms large. His ability to inspire, to push the boundaries of what was possible, and to elevate the game of basketball made him more than just a player. He became a global icon, one whose name transcended sports and whose impact reached far beyond the court. Michael Jordan wasn't just a basketball player, he was the standard of excellence, the epitome of greatness, and a symbol of how far passion, determination, and hard work could take someone. Michael Jordan's influence on basketball wasn't just confined to the courts he played on, or the championships he won. By the time he retired for the second time, his legacy was cemented, not just through his accolades, but through the way he had fundamentally reshaped the NBA. Every aspect of the game, from the way players approached the sport to how the media and fans viewed the game, had been influenced by his competitive nature and unrelenting pursuit of excellence. Even as Jordan left the game again, his presence continued to define the sport. Jordan's influence was not just in the way he dominated games, but in how he changed the culture of basketball. He elevated the sport to new heights and made it more than just a game. For the first time, basketball players were seen as global icons, not just athletes. The NBA grew exponentially in popularity during the 1990s, with Jordan serving as the face of the league. His fame went beyond the court, with commercials, endorsements, and a sneaker empire that transcended basketball. He became a marketing juggernaut, and through his partnership with Nike, Air Jordan shoes became a symbol of success, style, and aspiration. His brand wasn't just a product, it was a lifestyle. Jordan's popularity wasn't just about his on-court dominance. It was his personality, his charisma, and the way he carried himself that made him a global superstar. Fans from all walks of life were drawn to his story. He was the ultimate underdog turned champion, the player who had been overlooked in high school and doubted at every turn but went on to become the greatest basketball player of all time. His story resonated with people because it was one of perseverance, hard work, and defying the odds. His ability to rise to the occasion in the biggest moments only added to his mystique. The Air Jordan brand wasn't just about shoes, it was about believing that you could be great, no matter where you came from or how many obstacles were in your way. Off the court, Jordan was also breaking barriers. He used his platform to be a positive force in the world, giving back to his community and supporting various charities. His commitment to making a difference became just as important as his basketball achievements. Whether it was through his work with the Make-A-Wish Foundation or his numerous donations to youth programs and hospitals, Jordan's impact stretched far beyond basketball. He had become a symbol of success and philanthropy, showing the world that athletes could be more than just entertainers, they could be role models and change-makers. Yet, as Jordan's career progressed, the question of who would succeed him as the best player in the world loomed large. The rise of Kobe Bryant and LeBron James created an era of debate around who the greatest player of all time was. As the torch was passed from Jordan to the next generation, the debate about his legacy grew more complex. Kobe Bryant, in particular, was often seen as the closest player to Jordan. The similarities between the two were undeniable, from their competitive fire to their on-court style. Bryant's championship wins and mentality were often compared to Jordan's, and as Bryant continued to build his legacy, the comparisons between the two intensified. LeBron James, too, entered the conversation, with his all-around game and physical dominance giving him the potential to challenge Jordan's legacy. The debate between who was the greatest, Jordan or LeBron, became a defining narrative in basketball culture. But for many, the answer remained clear: Michael Jordan was, and would always be, the greatest basketball player of all time. The way he performed in clutch moments, his 6 championships, his perfect finals record, and his ability to elevate his teammates had set a standard that no player could quite match. This debate wasn't just about comparing statistics, it was about how each player approached the game. Jordan's intensity and focus were unmatched. He didn't just play to win, he played to dominate, to break the will of his opponents. He played with a chip on his shoulder, constantly seeking to prove that he was the best. LeBron's versatility and ability to make his teammates better were often seen as his strengths, but it was Jordan's relentless pursuit of excellence that set him apart. His mentality wasn't just about playing the game, it was about winning, and not just winning, but winning with a level of style and panache that no one else could replicate. Kobe Bryant's career mirrored Jordan's in many ways. His work ethic, his mindset, and his approach to the game were often described as Jordan-like. Bryant's 5 championships and his ability to perform under pressure made him a worthy successor to Jordan's throne. But even Kobe acknowledged the debt he owed to Jordan. The two shared a special bond, with Kobe often speaking about how much Jordan mentored him throughout his career. Jordan's legacy was felt in every move Kobe made on the court, from his footwork to his mid-range jump shot. In many ways, Kobe was a product of Jordan's influence, a player who learned from the best and used those lessons to create his own legacy. But the conversation surrounding Jordan's place in history was never just about the players who came after him. It was about the impact he had on the game as a whole. Jordan's rise to fame changed the way basketball was viewed. He elevated the sport from an American pastime to a global phenomenon. The NBA's popularity exploded during the 1990s, and Jordan was the catalyst for that change. He didn't just elevate his own status, he elevated the entire league. His success paved the way for players like Bryant, James, and others to be global stars in their own right. Jordan's retirement in 2003 marked the end of an era, but his legacy would continue to shape the future of the NBA. The players who came after him were all influenced by his approach to the game. They were inspired by his mindset, his ability to perform under pressure, and his relentless desire to be the best. Even players like LeBron James, who had the potential to surpass Jordan's achievements, recognized the standard Jordan had set. And for the fans, Jordan was the blueprint for greatness. He was the player everyone measured themselves against, the player who set the bar higher than anyone thought possible. In the years that followed, Jordan remained involved in the NBA in various capacities. His role as an owner of the Charlotte Hornets gave him a new platform to shape the future of the league. While he was no longer playing, he still had a significant influence on the direction of the sport. His presence in the league, both as a businessman and as a cultural icon, continued to remind people of the greatness that had come before them. Jordan's legacy didn't just live on through the success of the players who followed him, it lived on in the way basketball was played and celebrated. His impact was not limited to one generation but spanned across multiple. He wasn't just a player who changed the game, he was a player who changed the culture of basketball. His story would continue to inspire athletes for years to come, and his name would forever be associated with excellence. The torch was passed, but Michael Jordan's greatness would never be forgotten. The game of basketball had been elevated by his brilliance, and his legacy would continue to inspire not only future generations of players but also future fans. Every time someone picks up a basketball, Jordan's influence is felt. His journey, his passion, and his dedication to the game have shaped the NBA into what it is today, and for that, Michael Jordan will always be the standard by which all others are judged. As Michael Jordan's career came to a close, his legacy had already grown into something beyond basketball. His influence on the NBA was immeasurable, and the sport itself had evolved into a global phenomenon. But what Jordan had achieved, both on and off the court, was something that transcended the sport. He became the epitome of success, the symbol of what it meant to be the best, and an inspiration for generations to come. The impact of his greatness was not just in the records he set, but in how he inspired others to push beyond their limits and chase greatness. Jordan's success wasn't just about his 6 championships or his 5 MVP awards, it was about how he reshaped the expectations of what a basketball player could be. When he entered the league in the 1980s, the NBA was in a very different place. Though talented players like Magic Johnson and Larry Bird had already begun to elevate the league, the NBA still struggled to break into the mainstream of American sports. But when Jordan arrived, everything changed. He was the catalyst for an explosion of popularity in the sport. The league went from being a niche interest to a cultural staple, and a large part of that success can be traced back to Jordan's arrival and his subsequent dominance. Through his individual performances and his larger-than-life personality, Jordan made basketball a global spectacle. He didn't just represent the Chicago Bulls, he represented the NBA itself. The world watched as he lifted the sport to new heights, and in turn, the NBA became a platform that could take athletes to places they had never been before. Players were now not just athletes, they were international superstars, and Jordan paved the way for the likes of Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, and other global icons who followed. Off the court, Jordan's influence was felt across various industries. His partnership with Nike and the creation of the Air Jordan line transformed the sneaker industry. The Air Jordan brand became a cultural touchstone, a symbol of status and achievement. The sneakers weren't just shoes, they were a representation of what it meant to be great. The Jumpman logo became iconic, transcending basketball and becoming part of the cultural lexicon. Jordan's brand wasn't just about selling products, it was about selling a lifestyle, a mindset, a belief that anyone could achieve greatness if they were willing to put in the work. But Jordan's influence extended far beyond the commercial and the cultural. His impact was seen in the way athletes viewed their roles in society. He was one of the first athletes to embrace his celebrity status while also using it to change the way the world viewed sports figures. Jordan was not just a basketball player, he was a businessman, an entrepreneur, and a philanthropist. He used his platform to support causes that were important to him, including donating millions of dollars to charities and becoming involved in various philanthropic endeavors. His contributions were not just about money, they were about using his status to make a difference. At the same time, Jordan's legacy also came with a deeper responsibility. As one of the most visible athletes in history, he had to navigate a world where every move he made was scrutinized. His career was not without its controversies. His decision to stay out of politics, particularly during the 1990 Senate race in North Carolina, became a talking point for many who believed he had a moral obligation to use his platform to speak out on social issues. In his famous response, "Republicans buy sneakers too," Jordan reinforced his stance on staying out of political debates. While this statement was heavily criticized, it highlighted the tension that many athletes feel between personal expression and the pressures of their public lives. Despite the criticisms, Jordan's focus remained steadfast, to be the best. And that single-minded dedication is what made him who he was. Jordan wasn't just trying to win games, he was trying to redefine the entire concept of excellence in sports. His competitiveness, his refusal to back down, and his work ethic were all key to his success. He wasn't just great because of his talent, he was great because of his mindset. Jordan's journey was one of constant improvement, constant striving, and relentless pursuit of greatness. Every time he encountered a setback, he used it as fuel to push forward. This was a mindset that many athletes, and many people in all walks of life, could adopt in their own pursuits. While Jordan's impact on the game itself was profound, his influence on future generations of players was perhaps his most enduring legacy. Every player who came after him, whether it was Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, or any of the countless others, grew up watching Jordan and sought to emulate his game. Jordan didn't just change how the game was played, he changed how players approached the game. His ability to perform under pressure, his competitive drive, and his unmatched skill level became the standard by which all others were measured. For many, Jordan wasn't just the greatest player in the world, he was the benchmark of what it meant to be a professional athlete. Kobe Bryant, in particular, always acknowledged how much Jordan had influenced his career. Bryant's game was nearly identical to Jordan's in many ways, both in terms of their skill set and their approach to competition. Kobe, like Jordan, was obsessed with perfecting his craft. He studied Jordan's moves and adopted his mentality. In interviews, Kobe often spoke about how Jordan had taken him under his wing, offering advice and guidance as he transitioned into the NBA. The mentorship that Jordan provided helped shape the career of one of the league's greatest players, and the bond between the two remained close throughout their careers. LeBron James, too, was inspired by Jordan's greatness, though he often spoke about wanting to carve his own path. While LeBron's game was different from Jordan's, his approach to leadership, his commitment to excellence, and his relentless work ethic were all qualities he inherited from Jordan. The debate about who is the greatest player of all time, Jordan or LeBron, has dominated basketball discussions for years, but one thing remains clear: Jordan's impact on the game of basketball is undeniable. Even though LeBron may have surpassed Jordan in some aspects, it was Jordan who set the standard for greatness. Off the court, Jordan's contributions to the NBA continued in his role as an owner of the Charlotte Hornets. As a majority owner, Jordan's focus shifted to building a competitive team and fostering an environment where players could thrive. His involvement in the team's growth allowed him to pass on the lessons he had learned throughout his career to a new generation of players, coaches, and executives. Jordan was still committed to making his mark on the NBA, not just as a player, but as a steward of the game's future. As Jordan's influence continued to shape the sport, his legacy remained firmly rooted in the idea of excellence. His story was a reminder that greatness wasn't just about talent, it was about how far you were willing to push yourself to be the best. Jordan's career was a testament to the power of hard work, determination, and mental toughness. He taught the world that success was not just about winning titles, it was about overcoming adversity, pushing past limitations, and always striving to be better. Today, Michael Jordan's impact can still be seen across the NBA and the world of sports. His name remains synonymous with greatness, and his influence is felt by every player who steps onto the court. His legacy isn't just in the records he set or the championships he won, it's in the way he changed the way people viewed sports. Michael Jordan didn't just play the game, he redefined it. And for generations to come, his story will continue to serve as the ultimate example of what it means to be the greatest. As the years passed after Michael Jordan's final retirement from basketball, his legacy solidified not only as the greatest player the NBA had ever seen, but as an enduring symbol of what it meant to push the boundaries of greatness. His influence extended far beyond the courts of Chicago, far beyond the game itself, as his impact touched every corner of the sport and the culture surrounding it. The narrative of his career became more than just statistics or championships, it became a story of inspiration, relentless pursuit, and transformative leadership. The basketball world had moved on, of course, with new stars, new challenges, and new narratives. LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, and others had taken up the mantle of the league's top players, each carving out their own paths while inevitably being compared to the figure who had set the bar. But no matter how many rings or MVP awards these players accumulated, Michael Jordan's presence loomed large. Every new achievement, every slam dunk or game-winning shot made by the next generation of stars was a reminder of the standard that Jordan had set. It wasn't just about talent, it was about everything he represented: a relentless work ethic, a refusal to accept anything less than perfection, and the ability to rise to the occasion when the stakes were highest. And yet, Jordan had always been about more than just basketball. His success off the court, his ventures into business, fashion, and philanthropy, was a testament to his ability to use his platform to influence the world in profound ways. The Air Jordan brand became a global powerhouse, not just in sneakers but in the way athletes were marketed. Jordan was the first to truly harness his fame in such a way that it became a cultural movement. The Jumpman logo was everywhere, on the streets, on athletes' feet, and in pop culture at large. It wasn't just about sports anymore, it was about style, identity, and what it meant to aspire to greatness. But as much as Jordan had achieved, what truly set him apart was his ability to inspire others to believe that they, too, could reach those heights. His story was the ultimate underdog tale, a boy cut from his high school basketball team, a young man doubted by many, who would go on to become the greatest player in the history of the sport. His journey was a powerful reminder that talent alone wasn't enough. It was the work behind the talent, the mental fortitude, and the belief that success wasn't just possible, it was inevitable if you were willing to do whatever it took to achieve it. Michael Jordan was no longer just an athlete, he had become a symbol. The phrase "be like Mike" encapsulated not just an admiration for his skills on the basketball court, but also the way he carried himself, the relentless nature of his drive, and his ability to inspire others to believe in themselves. For millions around the world, Michael Jordan was a figure who represented the pursuit of dreams, the overcoming of obstacles, and the achievement of greatness. And then, in the later years, the story came full circle. Jordan, once the unstoppable force on the court, became a steward of the game. His role as the majority owner of the Charlotte Hornets was his new challenge, his next chapter. It was no longer about winning championships on the court, it was about building a successful organization, mentoring young talent, and continuing to shape the future of the game he had helped elevate. Though his hands no longer gripped the basketball, Jordan's legacy was still very much alive. The Hornets, under his guidance, grew into a team that was competitive, that had an identity, and that embodied some of the qualities that had made Jordan great. His leadership continued to be defined by the same principles that had shaped his playing career: determination, focus, and an unyielding desire to be the best. But the most gratifying element of Jordan's legacy was how it transcended time. As the NBA continued to evolve, as the game became faster, more perimeter-oriented, and more global, the core tenets that Jordan had instilled in the sport, the importance of hard work, the necessity of mental toughness, and the will to never settle, remained unchanged. The players who followed in his footsteps were, in many ways, shaped by his example. Whether they were trying to emulate his moves on the court or channeling his drive in the weight room, they were constantly reminded of the standard he had set. Perhaps the most significant aspect of Jordan's legacy was the recognition that greatness doesn't come easy. It isn't handed to you on a silver platter, and it's not about what you're born with, it's about how hard you're willing to work, how much you're willing to sacrifice, and how much of yourself you're willing to give to the pursuit of excellence. Jordan's story was never just about basketball, it was about the values he embodied and the lessons he imparted through his actions. In the end, Michael Jordan wasn't just the greatest basketball player to ever live, he was a trailblazer. He changed how the world viewed athletes. He showed us that you could be more than just a player, you could be a force for change, a global icon, and a role model. And while the debate over who is the greatest player of all time will continue to rage, one thing is clear: Michael Jordan will always be the benchmark by which all others are judged. His legacy is not just in the numbers he put up, but in the way he changed the game, the culture, and the lives of those who watched him play. His story, from the boy cut from his high school team to the NBA's greatest player, wasn't just a basketball story, it was a human story. A story about overcoming adversity, about chasing your dreams, and about the relentless pursuit of greatness. And as time moves on, Michael Jordan's impact will continue to be felt. His influence on the game and the world of sports will endure long after he's gone, just as his impact on the culture of basketball will never fade. Michael Jordan's journey may have come to an end, but the lessons he taught will live on forever. It was never just about basketball. It was about setting a standard, one that will always be remembered and never be surpassed. And that, ultimately, is Michael Jordan's greatest legacy.